Okay, tell me if this sounds familiar. You replay that one awkward thing you said 5 days ago again. You've written and rewritten the same email in your head 10 times, but haven't hit send. And every small decision feels like you're trying to disarm a bomb. That's not just anxiety, that's ADHD overthinking, and it's a real thing. In this episode, we're breaking down why ADHD brains are so prone to overthinking, how it shows up differently from anxiety, and most importantly, how to get out of the spiral. I'll share what actually is going on in your brain, why just stop thinking about it never works, and some ADHD friendly ways to interrupt the loop so you can think clearly, take action, and finally relax. Whether you're stuck in rumination, struggling to make decisions, or exhausted by the mental noise, this episode will help you understand your brain and shift the cycle with compassion and clarity. Welcome to the Self-Loved ADHD Woman's Way podcast. I'm your host, Jen Barnes. If you're an ADHD woman entrepreneur, ADHD adjacent, or ADHD-ish, you've come to the right place. We'll dive deep into the unique challenges you face, from the inner turmoil to the outer obstacles. We'll blend neuroscience, IFS, and somatic healing, and explore practical strategies to help you navigate the world of entrepreneurship with ADHD with greater ease and effectiveness. I'm glad you're here. Hey, it's Jen. I'm so glad you're here. ADHD overthinking. I feel like if you were to look that up in the dictionary, not that they usually have phrases, but if you were to look it up, it should have like Jen Barnes, my name, and then all my earlier names, my birth name, my married name, my divorce name, all that stuff. This one really resonates with me. And so I'm excited to share how I've worked with it over the years so that it doesn't plague me as much, in hopes that you too will feel less bothered by all of these thoughts spinning in your head all the time. So first, before we get into what to do, I want to talk about why ADHD overthinking happens. So, overthinking in ADHD is not just a bad habit, it's the outcome of a few overlapping brain based patterns. One is executive function challenges. So, our ADHD brains struggle with things like initiating, sequencing, completing tasks, things like that. And so when something feels unclear, unsafe, or open ended, the brain can loop in thought instead of taking action. It's like spinning your wheels on a frozen patch of road, right? I'm in Minnesota, so I don't know if everyone gets like ice and snow, but it's a lot like that where we're just like spinning in it and not really taking the action because we're stuck in the thoughts. Another piece of this is working memory limitations. So we know with the ADHD brain, many of us have a limited working memory, which means like the amount of things we can hold in our brain all at the same time and then manipulate those things, not like being manipulating, but like play with those things while holding them all in our brain is limited. And so that means that with ADHD, we often have challenges with holding multiple ideas in our mind, let alone figuring out how they all mix together and apply. That's why for a lot of us, I know for me, this is true. If I get things out, whether I write it down or I make a picture or a collage or something like that, I can better manipulate the data or the thoughts. I can put them together better. So because of this challenge, for us then, decisions can feel super high stakes and then increase the urge to keep thinking them through, even though the process doesn't feel productive. So like we might, and I can do one or the other, right? I can impulsively make decisions like that and just be like, yes, that's what we're doing. Or it can be like, no, I got to think about it. And then you think about it and think about it and thinking about it. And in some ways, it can be a way parts of us avoid taking very scary action. But in other ways, it's truly our brain just can get stuck in this place. Another way that we can get into overthinking is rejection sensitive dysphoria, or RSD. So the fear of saying or doing the wrong thing can end up leading to endless rehearsals or rumination about what to do or what we did or what we want to say or did say, so that overthinking becomes a form of self protection where we're trying to avoid mistakes or criticism or rejection. Another piece of this can be time blindness, which is really a less ableist way to say that is we have a non-linear sense of time in that we see things as now or not now, not like the way neurotypical brains see them as just kind of hour by hour, day by day, year by year. So without a clear sense of time, our ADHD brains often revisit past mistakes or rehearse future situations on repeat, creating this like sense that we are just stuck in time, which can then make us keep overthinking about this place that we're stuck. So, the last piece that we're going to talk about today is our tendency to seek dopamine. And we've talked before about how our ADHD brains have limited access to the neuromodulator dopamine. And dopamine is important in executive function, particularly motivation and organization, getting ourselves to do stuff, focusing. And so our brains tend to crave stimulation. And it just so happens that overthinking, especially emotionally charged rumination like RSD, can temporarily stimulate the brain, even if it's not entirely helpful or healthy. So, this explains why, even though I know when I get home from work, my evening will be much calmer and more peaceful, more meaningful, more aligned with how I want to live my life if I sit and read. And yet, I feel super pulled to look on YouTube and listen to Heather Cox Richardson and Brian Tyler Cohen talk about the state of the world. At least Heather Cox Richardson is more even keeled. I love Brian Tyler Cohen, but he can be really intense and really rile the person up. And so if you're in that, like I am, when we're doing that, a lot of times, like I can even feel it in my body. I'm just like, I feel pulled to watch this. Like it's just like I need to be activated. And I don't think it doesn't feel like I want to be pissed or angry. It truly just feels like I need something to get activated over. And that's not entirely useful or effective or aligned with how I want to live my life every night. So that can be another piece of it. It's important to also see that our ADHD thinking is often, or at least often ends up being a substitute for action, not a precursor to it. So, and I see this a lot when I have worked with entrepreneurs like myself, where we'll get into these patterns of overthinking, and it's almost like a little sneaky way of avoiding having to do the uncomfortable thing or the boring thing, uninteresting thing, whatever you want to call it. That can be another piece. All right. So now I want to take a moment and talk about ADHD overthinking versus the overthinking that comes with anxiety. And I want to talk about this specifically because they do have a lot of overlap, but also many of us ADHD women have been diagnosed with anxiety at one point in our lives. And sure, some people misdiagnosed. And from where I sit, both in my own life and just working with ADHD women, it seems to me that having to mask or learning to mask so that we fit into society's box, which there's a lot of extra pressure for women to do so, that creates anxiety because we're just like, oh, I got to get everything done. And so, even though a lot of us have anxiety or had anxiety, there's a difference between the overthinking that happens with that and the overthinking that happens with ADHD. And so, the reason that matters is because how you approach them can be different. So they're related because both of these types of overthinking, ADHD type of overthinking and anxiety overthinking, involve mental loops where we're replaying events, worrying about the future, catastrophizing, or trying to predict outcomes, like creating certainty, which we know isn't always possible. And also, both ADHD overthinking and anxious overthinking can result in physical tension, like neck tightness, shoulder tightness. That's where I tend to feel mine. You might feel yours somewhere else. Sleep issues, because if you're thinking when you're trying to fall asleep, or if you're not getting those thoughts out during the day, I like journaling for that, by the way. You can end up having wild dreams as your brain processes or have a hard time falling asleep. It can also result in emotional fatigue. And that makes sense because if your brain is just going, 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 and then your emotions are following, it can become an emotionally intense experience as well. Also, both types of overthinking are rooted in a nervous system that's on high alert, meaning your fight or flight response. And that is especially true if you have a complex trauma history. So, that's important because when that happens, nervous system regulation tools are going to be helpful for both types of overthinking. So, before we get into that, though, let's talk about how ADHD overthinking and anxiety overthinking differ because they are different in these important ways that then influence the way we want to attempt to address it. ADHD overthinking is often triggered by our like executive dysfunction, which I don't really like because it implies we're defective or something, but our executive functioning not going the way neurotypical brains go, or decision paralysis. Whereas with anxiety, this overthinking is often triggered by fear based thinking and perceived danger. And again, remember, you could have both, but when it's an ADHD thinking spiral, it's usually executive functioning that's contributing to it versus fear. With with ADHD overthinking, as you can imagine, our thought loops can be nonlinear, so not like a smooth line. They can be distracted and sometimes even oddly specific. Whereas with anxiety, our thought loops tend to be more tight, repetitive, and rooted in what if scenarios. In fact, when we work with people who have anxiety overthinking, one of the things we'll do is we'll say, okay, well, what is the worst case scenario? And what would you do if that happened? And then they say, well, I mean, I wouldn't like it. Okay, yeah, but what would you do? Well, I would do this. Okay, and then what would happen? And then what would happen? And then what would happen? And eventually they get to, well, I guess I'd be okay, even if I didn't enjoy all that. And that doesn't necessarily work so well with ADHD overthinking, at least not when I've tried it personally. But you can give it a go and see how that goes for you. ADHD overthinking is often tied to incomplete tasks, shame, or even memory glitches. Whereas with anxiety, again, it's often about that future danger, safety, and survival. It makes sense that with ADHD, our brains would overthink or get obsessively focused on our tasks that aren't done or shaming ourselves for the tasks not being done because that is one of the biggest struggles that a lot of us have is getting our stuff done without sacrificing our peace, leisure, rest, and fun. I guess fun and leisure could be the same thing. But it's one of the struggles of ADHD, and so it makes sense that our overthinking would tend to spiral around our tasks. And that ADHD overthinking can feel like you're mentally running in circles without emotional panic unless you're in an RSD spiral. Whereas the anxiety overthinking can feel like these emotional alarm bells that are going off. And I certainly remember that in my 20s when I would have my anxious thoughts. It was like intense worry thoughts that they were so excessive, I just couldn't stop them. And it felt very big and emotional in my body. Whereas the ADHD overthinking, when I'm not also feeling anxious, very much feels like a mental running in circles. And you can check for yourself and see when you're in one or the other, you can just see what that feels like. What do you notice in your body? What do you notice in your experience? ADHD overthinking may stem from trying to get clarity to take action. And that makes sense because a lot of us are, until we learn that mistakes are just learning opportunities and there's nothing wrong, but more just like navigating our way, learning from our experiences, a lot of us can avoid mistakes at all costs. We can get pretty perfectionistic. So it makes sense then that sometimes with ADHD overthinking, we're just trying to like get clarity on what action to take so that we do it quote unquote right. Whereas overthinking with anxiety is usually about avoiding perceived harm. And those are close, like, sure, When we're overthinking about doing it right, we can be avoiding criticism and perceived harm, but there's a different energy to it. It feels less, it just feels less high strung and more like a motor running. So you can think of ADHD overthinking as a processing glitch, whereas anxiety overthinking is more of a safety glitch, meaning like your nervous system is perceiving threat and danger where things are actually safe. And the truth is both deserve compassion and each needs different tools. So I want to talk about the tools for ADHD overthinking. The anxiety is something for another day. And there's really two ways to approach this, or at least the way I look at it. One is in the moment, working with overthinking, and then another one is giving our brains more support so that they're less likely to have these processing glitches. They're still going to happen. We still have ADHD. There's not like a cure for ADHD. Not medication isn't a cure. It just treats the symptoms. Just like the things we'll talk about in a moment are also just going to help you with the symptoms. But we'll start with how we can pause or cope with the overthinking in the moment. So the first step is you have to notice you're doing it. And the thing is like how do you notice when you're overthinking? Well, I will tell you that having practiced mindfulness in my early days of therapy with my first therapist, back still when I was an actuarial analyst, so I didn't know anything about any kind of healing modalities. I had to learn what the word therapy meant. So way back, like 20, oh my gosh, 26, almost 27 years ago now, I practiced mindfulness and that started to help increase my ability to notice it. And we're going to talk about that in a bit. But other ways you can notice it is you might notice your thoughts just spinning, again, like that car on ice. I'm trying to think of if there's like a hot weather equivalent of that. It does get hot in Minnesota, but I don't know, maybe spinning on sand? I feel like you might not spin on sand as much. Sorry, people who don't have ice and cold. I don't have an idea for that, but a metaphor for that. But when you notice yourself like spinning on ice, like you're not going anywhere in your brain, that can be one way to catch it. Another can be your behavior. If you have been trying to get something done for a long time, and then after a few hours, you've just been sitting there and haven't done much, check it out. There's a decent chance that you've been overthinking in an ADHD overthinking spiral. So that's another way to check. Info dumping, if you're doing a lot of info dumping for verbal processors, you might be overthinking because you're verbalizing everything and that just might be how it comes out for you. But there's lots of different ways to notice this overthinking that happens with ADHD. So once you notice it, the next thing you want to do is pause because we can't address the overthinking from the same state that you're in when you're doing the overthinking. So it's important that you pause, take several breaths. In fact, I suggest first noticing your natural breath as it is. You might notice movement as you breathe. You might notice you are holding your breath and you might choose to invite the breath in. You might notice the pacing of your breath and just see like what you notice about it and then start to invite your breath to slow and deepen. Just even up to 5 to 10 breaths, maybe more, maybe a little less, but let yourself start to get grounded and centered. And to help you get grounded, you can do things like go out in nature or stomp your feet on the floor, or if you're in a chair, hold the bottom of the chair and dig your heels in while you pull your arms up. I don't know if you're gonna be able to catch that on audio only, but there's different ways you can get grounded while you connect with your breath. And then from that place of groundedness, once you're centered, you'll be able to hear that inner wise woman voice that we always talk about, your self energy, to help you take aligned action. Because a lot of times with ADHD, our impulsivity jumps in and we can be reactive or we're like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. This happens to me. We get tired of the overthinking. And so then we just make a decision. And then I don't know about you, but end up paying for it later in at least, I don't know. I don't know if I can give it a percent, but I'd say at least half the time. I regret that, probably closer to 80%. So, if you can get yourself to notice this, take the pause, connect with your breath, get yourself grounded and centered so that you're hearing your inner wisdom, then you can start responding instead of reacting. Now, let's talk about how to set your life up to reduce the frequency of overthinking. And probably none of this is going to be surprising, but I want to talk about why they're important because each one has a reason they help. And so sometimes if we're like, okay, this will actually help my brain and make my life easier versus some other big thing of long term health and wellness, then we might be more motivated to do them. So, the first one I want to talk about is movement. And I specifically use the word movement, not exercise and purpose, because so many people have an aversion to the word exercise. And listen, I get it. I was part of the toxic fitness industry in the 90s. I taught group fitness for 17 years, and I apologize to everyone who I impacted negatively being part of that system. So I get it. I get why the word exercise can be a trigger for people. This is not that. We just need to move our body. And in fact, moving your body 30 minutes a day is going to do wonders for your executive function. The reason this is because it increases dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin, three neurobiological chemicals that are all crucial for ADHD brains. So they can also reduce both ADHD symptoms and anxiety. So there's that benefit. But as I talk about getting in movement, be more flexible with it. Don't be so hard on yourself. Like, I got to get to the gym. What if you even did 3 or 4 days of 30-minute exercise stints, maybe up to an hour, whatever you've got in you, where you do different kinds of workouts that you enjoy. And then on the other days, you just try and get movement in throughout your day. So what this looks like for me is, and I mean, because I was part of the fitness industry, taught group fitness, and I used to run 6 miles a day, way back before my 30s. And then I was like, that's too hard for my body. No slight against runners who you're finding it isn't hard on yours. It was hard on mine. But because I have those habits, I do tend to work out 6 days a week, but I don't always go for a full hour because I'm finding that for the reasons I need it now in my 50s, I don't need to do more than 30 to 45 minutes a day. Whereas when I was in my 30s, I still wanted to have like killer abs, an awesome butt, and toned arms. And now I just want to be healthy, fit, strong, well, and mobile, and also have my brain function. So if you're more in that camp of things, 30 or 45 minutes is lovely. So what this looks like for me is 3 days a week, I lift weights. I've got like a little mini garage gym out in my 2-car garage because only have one car for myself. And yes, that's a luxury. There was a time when I was doing it all in my house before I had that changed. But I have like a little weight bench I got that was inexpensive, and I got some weights to lift with. And I change it up. I also have something called a Body Boss, which I got during COVID, and the company had like its own website. Now when I need new bands or whatever, they're like heftier bands that hook into this base. Then you can do squats and all kinds of exercises. Anyway, this is not an ad for that, so I'll circle back to what I mean. But you can find on Amazon, I think you can find the whole Body Boss system, Body BODY. Sorry, BODY. I know I'm saying that with my Minnesota accent. And then boss, like your supervisor is the boss. That was great for lifting weights during COVID when I couldn't go to a gym or was staying with someone who didn't have a weight bench or any of those kind of things. So I do that 3 days a week. Really important for women, especially over 40, because we start to lose muscle and then we can end up with osteoporosis or before that, osteopenia. Like bone problems essentially. And so weight training can help with that. Also, it can keep us from reducing our muscle mass as quickly, which starts to happen at age 40. So, anyway, again, not an ad for weightlifting, but that's why I choose weightlifting for 3 days a week. And then 2 days a week, I do Zumba. And then one day a week, I'll do a HIIT workout on Grow from Anna. She's awesome. She's got an app. It's super cool, super affordable, and she's super sweet, but there's no talking. She just plays music and then the video shows what you're going to do, different kinds of workout options. And you may have counted that 7. So I always miss at least one day. It just happens. Whether I have a dentist appointment or a late coaching session, and so I don't get up early the next day to do all that, I find that I usually get in 5 or 6 days. So if you can do that, and then, do even 3 days of that. And then the other days, just try and get in movement. So, what that looks like for me is between clients. So, I schedule my clients every hour and 15 minutes. So, I'll see clients for an hour, have a 15-minute break so that I can go to the bathroom, do my progress note, and then go for a walk around the block. And so on my days that I don't work out, I get pretty close to 30 minutes of just doing my walks around the block, if then you include walking to and from my car. So that's a nice way to do it. If you're working from home, maybe every hour you take a walk around the block, or maybe every 2 hours you take a walk around 2 blocks. I don't know. You can space it out, figure out how you wanna do it, and if you have a dog, that's a great way to do it. But it could also be dancing in your kitchen or putting on some of your favorite songs and dancing that way. Doing some yoga or Pilates. It doesn't have to be like a big ordeal to get this movement in. But again, on the days you don't feel like doing it, try saying to yourself, "I'm gonna feel so much better after I do." Not just in my body, but in my brain. That is usually what gets me to do it on the days I'm not feeling it. So, thought I'd share that extra piece. The next piece that is not going to be surprising to anyone is getting at least 8 hours of solid sleep. This is crucial for everybody because there are plenty of studies out there that show sleep deprivation significantly worsens executive function, as well as impulse control and emotional regulation. In fact, some of the studies out there, not even specific to ADHD, talk about how I think it's driving on 6 or less hours of sleep. I can't remember. Don't quote me on this, but on a certain amount of sleep or less is actually equivalent to driving while intoxicated from alcohol. That your cognitive functioning is that impaired. And the thing that's tricky with sleep is we don't think we're impaired. At least with alcohol, I mean, not that I'm suggesting anyone drink and drive, but with alcohol, usually we have some awareness we're impaired. So then, we know not to drive. But with sleep, we oftentimes don't realize how cognitively impaired we are. So, probably what influenced people to do these studies. So, when you think about that, and then you add ADHD in the mix, it not getting solid sleep consistently is going to exacerbate your ADHD. It's just going to. That's how it is. And so, it's important that you prioritize sleep. And I get that can be tricky. That we're not going to unpack how to get to that, but I do want to say poor sleep is linked to increased rumination and emotional reactivity. Anyone who's gotten in an argument after they didn't sleep the night before knows that. And this is especially true with ADHD. So, really important that you're prioritizing your sleep as much as possible. I get it. If you've got a newborn baby, try and get that sleep in as much as possible. And, that might be having your house be less than perfect while you're napping when the baby's napping. I'm not going to try and, I don't even know what the word, because I'm not a man. I can't say mansplain, but child-free woman splain to moms how to navigate that, because I understand it's really hard and I don't want to in any way make it sound like it's simple, but that's something to problem solve with your circle of support if you have one. So the next piece that's essential if you want to set your brain up for less overthinking is eating nutrient dense food. And this one is really important, having protein at every meal. Now, I'm almost completely plant-based. I still take honey for allergies and occasionally have some goat cheese or eggs, very rarely. But that protein at every meal, whether it is animal protein or plant-based protein, is essential because it helps stabilize blood sugar, which then reduces irritability and, most importantly, cognitive fog. So if you've ever played the game of, oh, I'm just going to do this before I go eat while I still have motivation, and then you experience what it is for your blood sugar to drop, for me, it usually feels like anxiety, and I cannot think straight. I literally cannot think straight. Well, that's because I haven't had any protein or food recently to help stabilize blood sugar. My blood sugar is dropping, and I also notice I can get hangry, so there's that. But what's important to understand is we know protein supports dopamine production, which, as we've talked about, is key in ADHD. And so it's just really essential that you're getting protein at every meal. And you can be creative with it. It can be a handful of nuts or trail mix or a beef stick if you're into that. Or apparently they have like vegan meat sticks now, which I don't really get because I don't really like meat to begin with all that much. But I guess I do have chicken sandwiches sometimes with the fake chicken. So I suppose, teach their own. Lastly, I want to talk about one that no one's going to be happy about, unless you already do it. Please stay on. It's mindfulness. So, regular mindfulness practice improves attention regulation, interoception, which is your ability to notice what it feels like in your body, like what your body feels like, what your inner experience is, and emotional awareness. And all of those help reduce that automatic overthinking. Plus, we know that ADHD adaptive mindfulness interventions are showing promising outcomes. And I want to talk about what I mean by that because a lot of times when I talk about mindfulness with my ADHD clients, they're like, oh my God, I can't. My brain will go crazy. I'll be just thinking nonstop. Listen, I'm in no way suggesting that you need to sit on a meditation cushion, not move, and clear your mind. That's not possible. Our brains are there to think. John Kabat-Zinn, who founded mindfulness-based stress reduction, he talks about like your brain is meant to think. You couldn't stop it if you wanted to. We think when we're sleeping. People think when they're in a coma. So why anyone thinks we should be able to just quiet our mind when we're doing mindfulness is ridiculous. So that's not the point. No one is telling you to quiet your mind. What mindfulness is being in the present with awareness. And so you can do that with anything. Thich Nhat Hanh used to talk about washing the dishes to wash the dishes, which is really mindfulness, right? I used to never understand because I used to hate doing dishes. So I was like, no, I'm washing the dishes to get them clean, not for the process of washing the dishes. But I now understand, like, I don't know, 30 years later, probably 20 years later, that what he meant is just being present in the moment. It's not actually about the dishes, but if you are washing dishes, you are present with it. You notice the water, the smell of the soap, the clinking of the dishes, all that kind of stuff. And you're just really present with it. And then as soon as you notice you're not being present, you bring your attention back because your brain is going to wander, whether or not you have ADHD, but it's going to wander more with ADHD. And the reason this is so helpful for ADHD brains is every time you notice you're distracted and bring your attention back to what you're being mindful of, like I said, in this case, dishwashing, it could be toothbrushing, walking. You could sit and be mindful of your breath for a couple minutes, but every time you notice you're distracted and bring your attention back to the focus of your mindfulness, that builds your ability to pay attention. I remember when I was an indoor cycling instructor, I would share different cool things from a fitness magazine that the American Council on Exercise used to put out called Fitness Matters. And one of the things I remember reading about was that they did a study on novice. It was for meditation, so like mindfulness meditation, and then novice meditators and experienced meditators. and that after 12 weeks of daily practice, both groups had improved their ability to pay attention. The part of the brain that does the paying of attention was actually, like, bigger in the brain. It was it it was able to function better. I was gonna say more strongly, but just it improved brain functioning to practice this mindfulness. So, again, mindfulness doesn't have to be intense. You can start by when you're brushing your teeth, notice each and every tooth. Oh, you got distracted. Notice where you're at again. Keep trying to focus. Up, you got distracted. Go back, and that's all you have to do is just notice, come back, notice, come back. And if you're like, but Jen, I'm going to do that and I'm not going to focus on it at all. And I'm not going to remember it till the next time I brush my teeth or like 3 days later. That's okay. As soon as you notice it, bring your attention back to your teeth. Maybe run your tongue on them or something. And that is part of the practice. Then the next time you do it, as soon as you remember, bring your attention back. And hopefully, by continuing to bring your attention back, you will start to be able to bring it back more and more while you're actually doing the mindfulness activity. All right. This was intense. This was a lot. I feel like I was like a fire hose today. So, good job with coping with my energy if you're still here. Yeah, so if this was helpful, I would love it if you would share this with another ADHD woman. Make sure you're subscribed or followed. And if you're like, gosh, I like Jen. I think I want to do some of the stuff she talks about, but maybe you're not ready to step into coaching or anything like that. I just want to let you know I have a journal book experience that I'm super excited about that I created for ADHD women to help you stop playing small with ADHD. That's actually what it's called, The Self-Love Woman Way, How to Stop Playing Small with ADHD. And it's a physical journal book that is both book and journal. And the whole thing is like laid out to help you make sure you do it. But then if you use those skills that I teach for helping you get to do the journal book, then you can use those in other places and then you've got those skills, right? So the whole thing is along the way, you're learning additional skills in addition to being, I guess I said addition twice, but anyway. So you're learning those skills in addition to diving into some of the deeper layers of what's keeping you stuck with ADHD, what is keeping you small, which is usually stuff that we don't notice, but tends to be things like fear or doubt, maybe even insecurity that you're unaware of, especially if you're a high achiever. A lot of times we high achievers aren't aware of insecurity until we need to go big or get criticism, and then we can crumble. So it can pop up and then we're like, "Oh, I didn't realize I had that problem. I thought I was over that." So, anyway, the book walks you through it and there's journaling prompts all throughout. But then it's not just a journal book. It comes in a keepsake box. It's a cardboard box, but it's branded and pretty. And then inside are these beautiful objects that I chose to allow you to do a weekly self-love ritual as a woman with ADHD. So, I'm really excited about it, and the link is in the description or the show notes, depending on where you're watching this podcast, if you want to check it out. And maybe you're like, that's not for me, Jen, but maybe someone you know would really benefit from that. I would truly love it if you would pass the word on. I am a very small business of one employee, and I have a lovely VA um, in the Philippines who's just delightful. But we're a small operation, and so I would just love it if you find this helpful to help me get the word out. That would be wonderful, because then I can keep doing this. So, all right, that's enough. That's a lot. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you next time. Take care.